They say prison begins the moment you realize no one is listening anymore. For me, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday morning in Chicago when my name stopped sounding like mine and started sounding like a mistake everyone had already decided I made. My name is Elena Carter, and this is the story of how I went to prison for a crime I didn't commit, and how that prison followed me long before the steel doors ever closed. I wasn't born broken. I wasn't reckless or greedy or desperate enough to steal. I was 26, working a stable job as an executive assistant at a mid-level luxury firm in downtown Chicago. I paid my rent on time, called my mother every Sunday, and believed, stupidly, that honesty was enough to protect a person. I learned the hard way that it isn't. The watch disappeared on a Friday, a simple object, a limited edition Rolex Submariner worth more than my annual savings. It belonged to my boss, Richard Harlan, a man who smiled politely but never looked at you long enough to remember your face. He kept the watch in his office drawer, something he liked to show off to clients, something he trusted the world not to touch, except someone did, and somehow that someone became me. I remember the exact second my life tilted. I was at my desk answering emails when HR asked me to step into conference room B. They didn't say why. They never do. Inside the room were Richard, the HR manager, and security. The door closed behind me with a sound that still visits me in my sleep. "Elena," Richard said, folding his hands, "we need to ask you a few questions." They asked calmly, professionally. Where had I been the previous evening? Had I entered Richard's office? Did I know anything about the missing watch? I answered honestly. I always did. Then they showed me the footage, security camera, grainy, black and white, a woman entering Richard's office after hours, same height as me, same build, same hair tied back. The timestamp showed my shift. The problem was, I wasn't that woman, but no one asked me who she was. They asked me why I did it. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept the possibility that this was real. That a life could unravel over something so small, so easily manipulated. Then Richard said the sentence that changed everything. "We found the watch in your locker." I felt my chest collapse inward. I didn't even have time to deny it before security escorted me out of the building. My coworkers watched as if I were contagious. No one spoke. No one asked questions, except her, Megan. She stood near the elevators, arms crossed, lips pressed into something that wasn't quite a smile. Megan worked in marketing. She was efficient, quiet, and invisible in a way that made people underestimate her. She was also my boyfriend's ex. I didn't realize it yet, but that was the moment she won. The police came later that day, formal, distant. They read me my rights in my own apartment, my hands shaking so badly I could barely sign the paperwork. I kept saying the same thing over and over. I didn't do it. I swear, I didn't do it. They nodded like they'd heard it all before. My boyfriend, Ethan, arrived halfway through the questioning. He stood in the doorway, frozen, watching as they photographed my locker key, my phone, my bag. He didn't touch me, didn't hug me, didn't say, "I believe you." That silence hurt more than the handcuffs. At the station, they processed me like an object. Fingerprints, mugshot, my hair pulled back so tight my scalp burned. The woman taking my photo told me not to smile. As if I ever would again. I spent the night in holding, surrounded by women who smelled like cigarettes, sweat, and despair. Some cried, some laughed too loudly. One woman stared at the wall like she'd already left her body. I kept thinking someone would come, a lawyer, Ethan, my mother. No one did. When bail was denied due to risk of flight, and the value of the stolen item, I felt something inside me crack open. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a case number. The trial came faster than I expected, and slower than I could survive. My public defender was overworked and underpaid. He believed me, I think, but belief doesn't rewrite evidence. The watch had my fingerprints. The footage resembled me. Megan testified she'd seen me near Richard's office that evening. She looked straight at me while lying. Did you know a person can lie with their whole soul and still sleep at night? I learned that too late. Ethan testified as well. He said he wasn't sure where I'd been that night. Not sure. Those two words sentenced me more than the judge ever did. When the verdict was read, guilty, the courtroom spun. I remember my mother crying. I remember Ethan staring at the floor. I remember Megan leaving early. I was sentenced to 5 years in a state correctional facility. 5 years for something I never touched. The day I entered prison, they took my clothes, my jewelry, even the hair tie from my wrist. They gave me a uniform that smelled like bleach and someone else's fear. The guard told me, "Don't trust anyone. Keep your head down." That was the last advice anyone gave me that was honest. My first night, I lay on a thin mattress, listening to screams echo down the corridor. Someone was being dragged. Someone was begging. Someone was laughing. I pressed my face into the pillow and cried silently, because crying out loud marked weakness. I thought about my old life, my job, my plans, my name. I didn't know yet that prison wasn't just about survival. It was about forgetting who you were and deciding whether you were going to fight to remember. And as the lights shut off and the cell door locked with a final, metallic certainty, one thought burned louder than fear. Megan planned this, and someday, if I survived long enough, I would prove it. The first weeks in prison feel like walking through fog. Every sound is sharper than it should be. Every movement you make is a signal, every glance a challenge. You're constantly balancing between being invisible and being a target. I learned that quickly. The first morning, I was assigned to a cell with Monica and Shayla. Monica had a permanent scowl, tattoos spiraling across her arms like barbed wire. Shayla was quieter, smaller, but her eyes missed nothing. They didn't ask me questions, they didn't welcome me, they just watched, new girl. Monica said after a long silence, "You better learn fast. Don't cry, don't talk too much, don't trust anyone." I nodded. Simple advice, repeated like a mantra in my head for the first month. The hardest part wasn't the food, or the cold, or the guards who treated us like cattle. It was the silence of the world outside. No one came, no one called. Ethan didn't even send a text. My mother wrote letters at first, but they came less and less, until the mail slot in my cell became a reminder that I was utterly alone. That's when I realized something I didn't know before. Being innocent doesn't make you safe. Megan's betrayal had reached farther than I imagined. Somehow, she had planted whispers about me, about my recklessness, my anger, about how I probably deserved it. People treated me like a threat before they even knew my name. I started getting subtle threats, a tray pushed into my foot in the cafeteria, a whispered warning during laundry duty, "Watch your back, new girl. Some of us don't like rats." Notes slid under the door, "You're not supposed to be here. Watch yourself." I learned to move like a shadow, speak like air, and watch everyone's hands. Every face had two sides. Every ally could be a traitor. Then came the first real test. A fight broke out over a missing shampoo bottle in the communal bathroom. Two women started yelling. One shoved the other. Before I knew it, someone grabbed my arm, shoved me into the fray. I stumbled, almost fell. Monica and Shayla didn't step in. The other inmates circled me, eyes wild. I froze, then I remembered something my mother had said years ago. "Elena, sometimes you survive by standing still, not by fighting." I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I held my ground and looked them in the eye until someone finally backed off. One nod from Monica later and the danger passed, but the lesson stuck. Survival was strategic, not physical. Weeks passed. I learned the routines, the guards' moods, the schedules, the quiet alliances. The silent wars over tiny privileges, a bed by the window, a spot in the yard, and all the while Megan's name lingered in my mind. I knew she was smiling somewhere, watching her plan unfold. My heart burned with rage, but I buried it. I had to. Rage would get me killed here. I needed patience, observation, timing. Then came the day that changed everything in prison, though I didn't know it at the time. I was folding laundry when I heard a familiar voice in the corridor. Elena Carter. My head snapped up. A woman in prison garb stood across from me, leaning casually against the wall. Her hair was tied back, eyes scanning like a hawk, and then I realized. I knew her. It was Leela, a former coworker from the office. She'd been caught in a fraud investigation months earlier and ended up here as well. Leela, I whispered, heart racing. Quiet, she said, putting a finger to her lips. Not everyone here wants to hear your story. She became my first friend in prison, cautiously, carefully. Leela had a way of reading people, understanding threats before they became violence. She warned me about the cliques, the guards who liked to provoke fights, the women who survived by manipulation. And she confirmed what I already feared. Megan had spoken about me here too, painting me as someone dangerous, untrustworthy. Every step I took was now shadowed by her lies. Prison changed people. I watched hardened criminals who had once been gentle mothers, quiet clerks, ordinary citizens. I saw them snap under pressure, betray friends for protection, and laugh when someone weaker cried. I saw the way trust could be a weapon as much as a lifeline. By the third month, I had learned to walk the line between invisibility and resilience. I never let anyone see fear, not real fear. I studied the guards, learned which ones would turn a blind eye if I needed a favor, which ones were cruel for sport. I memorized routines. I memorized people. And in the quiet moments, I imagined Megan's face, and I promised myself, this story wasn't over, not by a long shot, because being innocent in prison doesn't protect you, but being clever, that could keep you alive. And survival was only the beginning. Prison has a way of teaching you that freedom isn't just the absence of bars. It's knowing who you are when no one else believes you. By the end of my first year, I wasn't the scared girl who had been dragged from my apartment. I was alert, careful, and patient. I kept my head down, earned small respect, and survived enough skirmishes to know how to protect myself. But every time I closed my eyes, I thought about Megan, about the watch, about the life I had lost. It was Leela who first suggested a plan, gather evidence. She said one night, speaking in whispers in the cell block, Megan's been bragging outside. If we can prove she framed you, maybe you can fight this. I didn't dare hope. But I had nothing else. The months passed. I learned everything I could from whispers, rumors, and stolen moments. Megan had contacts at work, yes, but she also had enemies who hated her for her arrogance. Slowly, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place, I realized there was a trail that could prove I hadn't touched that watch. My chance came unexpectedly. One day, a new inmate arrived, a temp worker from Richard's office. She was young, scared, and importantly, honest. She had seen Megan take the watch from the desk that Friday. At first, she wouldn't talk. Fear is heavier than truth. But I promised protection, and slowly the pieces came out. Megan had planted the watch in my locker, falsified emails, and spread rumors about me at work. I felt a spark of hope I hadn't felt in years. We worked quietly. I gathered affidavits, wrote letters, and with Leela's guidance, contacted a lawyer outside. Each week, I waited for a response, pacing my cell like a caged animal. Each week, I convinced myself I wasn't deluding myself again. Meanwhile, Megan's shadow loomed over me in subtle ways even here. She had somehow heard about my efforts and tried to intimidate me through messages delivered by other inmates, but by now, fear had lost its power over me. I stood my ground. I spoke carefully. I waited. Finally, the call came. My lawyer had gathered enough evidence to file for a retrial. He had the witness, the documentation, even security footage showing Megan in Richard's office the night of the theft. The day I was called back into court felt surreal. 5 years of my life condensed into a single moment. The courtroom smelled the same as before, but now I walked in not as a victim, but as someone armed with the truth. Megan was there, seated smugly, her smile fading as the evidence piled against her. I looked at her once, no anger, just the quiet satisfaction of someone who had survived. The verdict this time was swift, not guilty. Freedom hit me like a storm, but it wasn't just freedom from bars. It was freedom from doubt, from betrayal, from the fear that had haunted me for years. I walked out of that courtroom into the sunlight, into the city I thought had abandoned me. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. My mother cried into my shoulder, clinging like she'd never let go. But I didn't need anyone to validate my survival. I had survived, I had fought, I had endured, and Megan. She faced consequences. The law eventually caught up with her, not enough to erase the years she stole from me, but enough to remind her that lies eventually crumble. I rebuilt my life slowly, a new job, a new apartment, careful friendships. I never forgot the lessons prison had taught me: patience, observation, resilience, and the cold fact that sometimes the people you trust most are capable of the deepest betrayals. But I also never forgot my own strength. Sometimes at night, I trace my fingers over the watch Richard had once lost, not to return it, not to relive the past, but as a reminder that truth, patience, and courage can survive even when the world turns its back. Prison tried to take my name, my innocence, my life. It failed. And I, Elena Carter, am still here.